Well, hello everybody, and thank you, Max and Simon, first of all, for inviting me. I understand I'm kind of a stranger here in this round, as I'm not a technical person at all. But as Max was introducing me, I'm a lawyer at a law firm that is specialized in product safety and product liability of non-food products. And with that, we also cover the subject batteries, and that's my specialization in this regard. So let me um, directly get to, can you see everything or do you see?
We see your screen, yes.
Okay, perfect. Because I see myself way in the middle of the screen. Okay, but then it's only from my side. Um, yeah, let me dwell into the subject directly. So the battery regulation is the big thing, a regulation from EU that is directly applicable in the member states of the European Union without needing and implementing national legal act. And it's already applicable since the beginning of last year, so 2024. But there are some provisions that will get into force later on. And this is a very, very big step in legal terms because you can speak of it as product compliance 2.0. We have some big changes now because before the EU battery regulation, batteries in the EU were mainly regulated in terms of waste management, so especially the recycling part. And now with the Green Deal from the EU and the Action Plan for Circular Economy, eco-design regulation, that is also was the prime example for the battery regulation, actually. We have now a fully grown regulation for batteries that covers basically everything that we have in terms of product compliance and product regulation in the EU. And this is just to give you a concise overview of the topics, the varying topics that you have. So we have very new things like sustainability requirements. So, for example, there is some carbon footprint that is coming up in the next years as an obligation for battery manufacturers to first of all label their batteries with the carbon footprint that they have, and the battery regulation also tells us what the stages are of the life cycle. And spoiler alert, it's the complete life cycle. That's relevant here. Also, there are obligations to get as much, or not as much, but to get different quotes and thresholds of recycled materials, recycled active materials into the batteries. This is also an obligation that will come in the next years. And then we have, besides the sustainability requirements, we have the classic product requirements that you might know from other products like safety requirements. Of course, every battery that comes into the internal market should be safe. We have a conformity assessment now, and this concludes also with the CE labeling. We now have a QR code that's also coming up in the next years, and ultimately will be the door to get into the battery pass. So a digital product passport, which is a very new system, which will also, from what I understand, manifestly change the data that you have on batteries and how you can recycle them, how is the life health of the battery, etc., etc. We also have our own supply chain system. So this is not to be confused with the CSDDD directive or other supply chain due diligence systems. This is a known system that the EU battery regulation imposes on battery manufacturers. And of course, as before, we have waste management covered as well. So this is the overview as of now. It doesn't look very complex. I understand that. It will be complicated in the next few years. Right now, at the moment, we only have a very few things. Okay, I have the time in mind. We have a very few things that extend the battery regulation. As you can see up there, the battery regulation is the main legal act that's covering the product compliance sphere of batteries in the EU. And this is being supported by other terms, and I just try to make it as concise and understandable as possible what kind of things these are. First and foremost, we have delegated acts and implementing acts, and so far we only have one. That's for the recycling operators mainly, and covering the methods for the calculation verification of the recycling efficiency. But there are more and more upcoming. So the whole battery regulation has these delegated acts that enable the EU Commission to extend the battery regulation in specific, mostly technical terms. We have also guidelines. By now, there's only one available, which is about the removability and replaceability. Again, that's a sustainability requirement. And of course, I said before, the EU battery regulation is directly applicable in the member states, but there are still national laws needed for some implementing measures, for measures for punishments and fees. For example, if you interfere with the regulation, and this is to be taken into account as well as some formal law, which is a bit ironic because the battery regulation is already applicable, but there are some provisions from the old law, so from a directive that is still in place and will be in place, if I remember correctly, until 2027. So you have to take this old law into account as well. And the last point I want to set, and then I conclude, is the omnibus sphere. This is kind of a new thing, and you might heard of the omnibus rule books that are coming out from the EU Commission, and now covers also the battery regulation. And this does not change the battery regulation that much, but in terms of digitalization it does, and in terms of the applicability of the supply chain due diligence systems. There was a big deal for manufacturers and for all economic operators that are obligated. And since it was apparently not possible either for the manufacturers to implement these provisions, and it was also not possible for the EU Commission to have the guidelines ready to tell the manufacturers, oh, how should we actually implement these provisions that we laid upon? The whole thing got postponed now until 2027, so we have another 2 years, and that's what I wanted to mention as well. And that's already it from my side, just to have a short overview. And if you want to reach out, there's some contact details as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan, a lot. A bit over time, but I think we still have a couple of minutes for some questions because there are already 2 in the chat. Maybe before I do, I will just read them out. The first one is, what about the impact of PFAS regulations on the battery market? Is there any new timeline for an in-execution date?
Very good question, which I unfortunately cannot answer because I'm not in the chemical compliance. I have a good colleague of mine who is doing these things over and over, day in, day out, and he's the expert on that. This also lets you see how complex these things are. So he's the expert that we have, one of the experts that we have on chemical compliance, and he could answer that. But this brings me to an interesting point. What I showed you was just the battery law. And of course, chemical compliance, just as the REACH regulation, for example, are also applicable right next to that and in parallel.
All right.
There was the second question.
Yes, a question from the audience as well.
So Sak Farouk raises his hand from Rimac.
Yeah, that's me. Firstly, Jan, that's a very good presentation. Appreciate the overview. I rather have, let's say, a high-level question more towards your direction. So I work in a company called Rimac, and we basically produce next-generation battery systems for various European and non-European OEMs and the automotive market in general. So in my capacity, I do have a lot of, let's say, an overview over the European markets and the regulatory laws, as well as non-European ones. And that gives me kind of a comparative basis to also comment. And basically, the question is like, considering recycling, ESG, someone in the audience today asked about PFAS, so prohibited substances, then about renewable energies, and so on and so forth. You know, there's an entire list of such kinds of regulations. Do you think that somehow sets Europe a bit behind in the battery technology race, especially when compared with China, let's say? So yeah, just need your opinion on that. Yeah.
Well, my answer is distinguished in the meantime. When I was starting to get into this topic, I thought so. I thought, yes, it might be a competition disadvantage that we have because we are over-regulating things. Now, and I actually know this from the last TraWeBa Congress in Leipzig, where I've been to, that the safety requirements China is establishing are more and more exceeding the safety levels that we have in the EU. And they still seem to manage, the company seem to manage to get these safety requirements in place and to meet the requirements. So I'm not sure as of now if this is really the only problem. What I fear, and this I get also from the battery spotlight from today, is the innovation power. I mean, I saw yesterday or on Tuesday a newsletter from our parliament in Germany stating that they cut back on the research and development funds, the public funds. And this is a very fatal sign, in my opinion, especially in these days, because we need a big focus point on this. And this is also what Simon was saying right at the beginning. To be competitive, we need the money in the right places to make innovation possible, especially in this terms of batteries. So long answer. And by the way, I know your company. I love the Concept 2 car. I never seen it live, unfortunately, and it's way out of my salary range, but it's a nice car. So yeah, that's my answer. So I think it's not just the regulation. I think this can be tackled. This can be done efficiently. But companies are struggling on the financial side, as far as I understand the most at the moment.
Yeah. Thanks for the answer. I think I do agree with you. The hit is more towards the financial side. Yeah. I'll give you an example. Currently, I'm working with quite a large German OEM company producing their next generation batteries, and we have very strict requirements, which are actually EU regulatory directives with regards to recycling, use of materials, which automatically just limits my selection of materials, and sometimes it increases the cost of the overall product. Appreciate the answer, and if you ever come to Zagreb, feel free to ping me. I'll try to get you a track day with the Concept 2 or the Rimac Nevera if I can. Yeah.
Oh, this would be a dream come true. Yeah, thank you very much, Sad. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, then maybe let me finish this or conclude this with the last question Fritz had, and I kind of have the same question, and you already answered part of it already. And Fritz wants to know, like, that's a lot of regulations. Maybe is it too much? Like, are all these regulations are actually helping us getting more competitive, or are they actually counteracting that? I know it's a long. You can talk a lot about it, but just a really quick answer for that.
It depends, and that's what lawyers always say. It depends. I would say it depends mostly on what kind of provision we're talking about. I see that some provisions on the supply chain obligations just very hard to implement because you have to go back to the actual resourcing of, for example, lithium. And this is what most companies here in the EU might not be able to do and might not be able to get the information they need from their suppliers. And this is something, there are practical issues involved. And this is the actual hurdle. And this makes it not impossible, but very hard to meet these requirements. For other requirements, for example, the waste management, I would say that's doable because we had that in the last years as well. So that's not entirely new. There are new nuances. And for the sustainability, I think we're talking about batteries, right? So it's the prime technology for the future to have a clean energy provider. And for this, we also need this provider to be sustainable. So it makes sense to have this regulation, to have the sustainability requirements, also to have this regulation, of course. And I would say that's doable and might serve as an advantage, for example, against the US. As far as I know, the US system is mainly at the moment it's a bit weird at the moment. It's based mainly on just get the plants going. Whatever. It's not about sustainability. It's also not about safety as much as it should be actually. But this might be an advantage because at the end of the day, the cleanest product and of course the safest product is the product that wins, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. And I actually don't want to cut the discussion short, so we can continue for another couple of minutes afterwards. But I want, because people are now have to go and have to leave the meeting, so I want to take the opportunity to thank everybody who attended today. I learned a lot. Thank a lot to all the speakers. Very insightful pitches. Most of them on time. I think we now kept our strict time limit in general, so I'm very pleased with this as well. And yeah, I enjoyed this meeting, this event today. We will continue next month on the 18th of September. I put already the link you can use to register for this event or follow the event on LinkedIn. We are also happy if you share the event in your network. So the more people are attending, the more interaction we will get. It would be very great if you could support us in that way. And yes, and with this, I think let us just continue the discussion, whoever has time for it. Because I think there was still one unanswered question in the chat for you, Jan.
Yeah, I have time. Let me open the chat and I can see it.
So it was the question on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't have it yet.
It's a lot of regulations. Does that help to get faster in competing or faster in growing, from Fritz Herzog?
That one we covered, but with the next
sorry.
one, how about the fact that the battery passport coming to EU and to sold
that one. Sorry.
products isn't valid from China imported parts and products? It even got a heart emoji.
Two now. Oh no, just one. To be honest, I don't really understand the question. So the battery passport is coming to you and to all batteries. Of course, imported batteries do fall under the battery regulation as soon as they, let's say, set foot in the EU internal market, unless they're just to go through to another third country, which is not part of the EU. Isn't valid. So I guess he's saying that the passport is not valid for China imported parts and products, or is he asking this? Because in this case, we have to first distinguish, do we have a battery? Or do we have, for example, a battery management system? And for that, we have to check actually if this very individual product is covered under the battery regulation. Let's say in normal terms, only batteries are covered, of course. So if the product is not a battery, it might not be required to have the battery passport, of course, on that. But even if it's a battery from China, and again, the best battery passport is applicable, or the provision is applicable in February 27. So when the provision is in place and we have the delegated acts for that in place as well, then it's also applicable for batteries that come from China.